Hello, it's Morris here, and today we'll be going through the pre-season 2, or they call it season 1.5 off-season patch changes. So there's been quite a bit of changes. Actually, all these changes has been documented in Discord, and some of them are actually pretty significant. And actually, they released this patch as part of the season 1.5 testing phase as well. So there's actually been quite a bit of changes in terms of some specific mechanic and also some cards, and I feel like there are some of them that actually make quite a bit of difference. So let's actually just go through all these changes. And there are actually kind of 5 types of changes. There are actually some changes in the game mechanic, also some cards being reworked, and some mechanical changes, meaning just the changes in like how the card mechanic works, and then there's the numerical changes, which are just small changes in the numbers, and finally of course just the text changes, which I'm not going to go through. Okay, first up we have the game mechanics, and sorry for the slides with so many different things, but first up we have Bubble Bomb, and now it has this additional buff where it says this unit's AoE attack deals 5 bonus damage regardless of stacks. Usually you'll probably only have 1 Bubble Bomb stack, so basically it means like a 15 bonus damage kind of thing. But I think the main one is actually about the bomb damage going from 20 to 24, and I think that's actually quite a significant change, because let's say in a game you have like 5 bombs, let's say, right, and each bomb does 4 AoE more, meaning 12 more, then it's basically like an extra 60 damage in a way. And of course it scales even better with the Heart of Ocean as well, because now each bomb for Heart of Ocean does 36 damage. So definitely a significant buff for Bubble, but still so we probably will see quite a lot of Aqua, be it Bubble or Jinx or Ram. So there's actually quite a lot going for Aqua. Next up we have Feather. I put it up there just because I want the text to be quite a bit bigger, because it is quite significant, because originally it says deal 1 bonus damage per hit, and then when this actually hits the target, increase this bonus by 1 damage, and that's like every hit will give you 1 bonus damage. But now it's changed to every 2 hits, which to be honest I think is fairer, because I think every hit is going to be very fast, just because you do get a lot of those Feather Dagger and those things as well. And I do quite like how Feather Dagger works now, because it counts as 1 hit. So yeah, I guess it kind of tuned down that power level, but I feel like it might tune it down too much, so I don't know. Of course it's quite hard to say like 1.5 hit, right? So it's either 1 hit or 2 hit. Yeah, so yeah, I think we'll have to really try out to see whether the Feather mechanic actually is competitive, and we'll have to wait until I guess they fix some of the bugs as well, because now I feel like the Mystic Rune for Bird, like Feather Descent, I think is a bit of a bug as well. It will take a while before we get to know how strong Feather actually could be. And next we have Energy Burst, and now actually you probably noticed if you played season 1.5 is that now for player 2 you also need 15 energy fragment to get an energy burst. So now basically both players need 15 energy fragments. So not sure if this actually gives player 1 an advantage. Probably still does now, just because now player 1 do get to start first and in a way have a head start in terms of 1 attack. So maybe they'll adjust this number at some point depending on like the win rate or something. So let's see. Okay, then let's look at the Reworked Cards. So first up we have Toothless Bite, and now it actually applies Death Mark for 2 turns. So this is the new card text. So it changed from 65 to 60, which is not too much, but I think the Death Mark is very strong, because even though it's only 2 turns, let's say if you play another 2 attacks after playing Toothless Bite, then basically you're dealing an extra 30 damage. So yeah, I think it's a strong change for Toothless Bite. Okay, next up we have Sponge, and I think this actually changed the whole card, because there are a few things that's changed. First is that it gives a 60 AoE shield, so shield all ally Axies. It doesn't shield summons, but still, giving 60 shield for all ally can be pretty strong, even though it's for 3 energy, especially against AoE, I would say. But I think the shield is still just like a bonus, because the main effect is actually that target any ally, convert all bubble on the target into Bubble Bomb. So of course you want to play on a 4 bubble ally, and so basically you'll get 4 Bubble Bomb instead. And now because of the buff of Bubble Bomb, you actually deal basically 96 AoE damage, and so that's like 288 damage, assuming that there's like 3 Axies on the opponent's team. And yeah, that's basically like a 96 damage per energy kind of effect, and that's already very good. on top of the shield that now it gets, and that's pretty strong. Of course, in terms of the actual effect, you probably have to deduct the 4 existing bubble, which is still pretty strong because once you do the calculation, it's still about 76.8 damage effect per energy, and that's just damage on top of the 60 shield per energy as well. So yeah, I think Sponge is now a pretty strong card in a bubble build, especially as a finisher. Okay, next up we have Believer, and yeah, I think this one ought to be changed because when I talked about it in my Beast video, I feel like this is not really working as it was, just because, so this is a new card text. What it was is that it actually consumes 3 rage and it only gives bonus damage of 5 per rage, which is very underwhelming. But now it only consumes 2 rage and it gives bonus damage per rage of 50%. And so if you consume 2 rage, it basically gives you 120 damage, and that is pretty good. Like, of course, you're taking away rage stacks, so you're getting further away from Fury. So in a way, if you want to take away that damage, then it's about 72 effect per energy, which is still pretty strong. And of course, in the late game where you think you're probably not going to get into Fury and you just want to kill the opponent as soon as possible, then doing this 120 damage per energy, I think is pretty strong. So now I think Believer could be a very strong card, but it still can be quite clunky to play just because sometimes you might want to get into Fury instead. And also, once you get into Fury mode, you don't actually get to gain rage as well. So in this case, you can only play this as like a base 60 damage kind of card. So that's another flip side of it. Let's say you draw into this while during your rage turn for your rage Axie. Okay, and then next one we have Bidens, and I don't know how to feel about this change because I think the main thing is that the whole effect has changed. So from before, it cleanses everything. So let's say if you have 40 poison stat, it was just cleanse everything, but now it only cleanses twice and grants 2 leaves. So cleanse twice can still be pretty good, I would say, against other debuff kind of team like bleed and other things, but against poison, just removing stick stacks basically is okay, but it's not like removing everything. So I think that is basically making poison at least more viable and not just being countered by 1 card, which I think is fair. So in a way, I'm okay with this change, even though of course, like when maybe you are shopping for Axie, you might be thinking about building a team with just like 1 Bidens or something that can just cleanse off all the poison, but now it can't do that. So you have to play it in a way a bit differently. Oh, another thing that I don't like, of course, is that originally it has retained, but now it doesn't. So meaning you can't really wait until you get debuff and then use this to cleanse, and now you just have to draw into it, which can be a bit annoying at times, just because let's say if one of your Axies got put to sleep, but if you don't draw it, then you don't get to cleanse it, so that can be a bit annoying. But of course the good side is that it now heals for 40, which is okay, but I think the main benefit is actually it grants 2 leaves. And this could be pretty significant, especially if you can target any ally as well. And of course this is good on Leafy team, where Leaf is an attack that consumes 3 leaves, and then for each leaf it consumes, it deals 10 bonus damage and it deals 3 hits. So it's basically each leaf gives you 30 extra damage, so 2 leaves is effectively like 60 damage. So in a way you can think of it as like a 40 heal plus like 60 damage if you put the leaves on the Axies with Leafy. But of course you still need another energy to play a Leafy, so maybe you can kind of split this bonus damage, maybe like 30 kind of thing, but still it's like a 70 effect kind of card on a Leafy team, which is still pretty good. So I can see that this might be running in some sort of more defensive kind of Leafy team. Okay, next up we have Shrimp, and now it's changed to target the closest or furthest enemy. So I think originally it was just the furthest. So I think it's good, given some option. Of course, it's still annoying that you can't target the mid unless you use the rocket stamp. But still, I think now having options to apply taunt is very good. Yeah, so nothing much to complain about, because applying taunt to opponents means other attacks will also targeting the opponent with taunt. So I think that's a good change. Okay, and then Tricky is actually a very small change, because basically now it says if initial, you have to heal yourself and then swap, but otherwise you can choose to heal any ally for 50 instead. So yeah, I think pretty fair change, because sometimes you don't actually want to heal yourself, you might want to heal other ally, but if you do want to get the swap, then you have to heal yourself. Okay, next up we have Zigzag. So now instead of dealing 20 extra damage, it heals 20 instead. So now it kind of fits into more of an sustain or like a bit of healing kind of team as opposed to like a full out aggro, because to be honest this card feels more aggro to me because it apply fragile, and so you want to actually deal damage to the opponent. Now changing it to heal actually probably hurts this card more, just because you do want to do extra damage using this kind of card as opposed to just healing, but it is what it is. Okay, next up we have a change in terms of the runes, and this case is the Mystic rune, and this is actually the old text here on the right. But what the new text says is that I assume it still gives all ally Axies 40 bonus max HP, but now it says heal all ally Axies for 1% of the rune owner's max HP. So instead of the HP of the other Axies, now it's only about the rune owner's max HP. So you can just have like a 500 HP plant, then all allies will be healed by 5 HP per turn. And let's say if you play for 10 rounds or maybe even more, then you can actually get up to like 150 heals or more. To be honest, I think the heal is pretty insignificant, and this change really is very minimal because the main effect is really about gaining the 40 bonus max HP. Okay, then we have some mechanical changes. So now Leafy Pod, Gecko Mask, and Feather Fan can now put on any card as opposed to like specific cards. So Leafy Pod used to be only be able to put on skill cards and shield card, but now you can put an attack card as well. So I think this is actually quite a big change, because then it allows, let's say, aggressive plant build like Leafy to gain leaves without needing to run any healing or shielding or something. So I think definitely a good change. For Gecko Mask, I think it's also a good change, because I think before you can only put in an attack card, but now you can actually put it on a skill or shield card, which then is actually pretty good, because Gecko Mask is more like a defensive kind of thing, because you apply taunt and then you might want to heal back or something. So yeah, definitely give this rune more options. Finally, for Feather Fan, I think it used to be able to put on only attack card, but now it can put on the skill cards as well. So you can put on some skill cards with maybe even 0 cost, so you can get a 0 cost like Feather. So maybe that's one angle to look at it. So yeah, good change overall. And then we have Strawberry Shortcake, which to be honest don't really see much play these days, because it has mostly been about sustain, and we haven't really seen sustain after the changes in the Blood Moon mechanic. Now it actually changes from unstable to banish, which I feel like I always assumed it was banished, and I think unstable is just too punishing. And even if it's banished, I still feel that it might not get played nowadays, just because sustain is not really a thing anymore. Good change, but I'm not sure of how significant it is in terms of changing the power level of this card. Okay, and then we have Neo, and now they added banish on Neo. Basically that just means you can only do it once, and you can basically only discard one of the opponent's card and then it will be banished. In a way, actually I can see it as a benefit, because once it's banished it actually thins out your deck, because Neo actually doesn't do anything in terms of like the effect other than discarding opponent's card. So of course there's a strong effect, but it doesn't like do any damage or healing or anything. So maybe at the late game you have a lot of energy, you might not want to draw into Neo, so I think it could be a good thing. Of course, the flip side is that sometimes it used to be that you want to put some charms with strong effect on a 0 cost card so they can gain that charm effect, but now of course having banished, then you don't get to play it again and again, so that's maybe a disadvantage. And so you might not actually want to put any charms on this card because now it has banish. And next we have Tassels, and the only change is that it added Retain, so I think it's a good change because now it has the option to play at a later turn instead of having to play in the first turn. So yeah, I think that's a fair change. Then next we have Stroll Star, and also it adds Retain, so I think actually this is quite a significant change. So you can now wait until the perfect moment to finish your opponents off using Stroll Star, as opposed to sometimes when you draw into it, if let's say all your opponents are at full health, then it doesn't do anything. It's basically like a dead card. So now having Retain definitely is a lot better. Okay, now this is probably one of the biggest change, because now Tiny Fan changed from 9 to 7 energy cost. That's like 2 energy cost change, and that just means you can actually play it with 5 energy after 2 energy bursts. So effectively, if you play at 5 energy, it's 80 damage per energy, which is okay. Effectively kind of one-shot the opponent, assuming the opponent doesn't have any extra HP or shield or anything. But you're actually still using 5 energy to do it, and at that point of the game, maybe you have some chip on the opponent and you're probably going to overkill quite a lot of the time. So I still don't know if this card is good at 5 energy, because at 5 energy you can do a lot of other things as well. So yeah, I think at 7 it's definitely more playable than before. 9 is just pretty much unplayable. I see some potential, but not that much at this point. Okay, next up we have Mosquito, and what it does now is that it changed to a single attack as opposed to a deal 2 hits, and base damage changed from 10 to 20, and then steal HP changed from 15 to 30. So if you just play it normally, it actually there's no change in a way, because the base effect is the same, because you're still dealing 50 damage and then healing for 30, so there's really no change in terms of the actual base effect. It's just that now, being a single attack card, you can actually equip the single attack charm that bugs have, so that's one good thing. But the flip side is that it actually works less well with the bug energy drink M, because then the base attack actually decreases a bit more. So overall it's not so much of a change. Of course it also scales less well with damage buff as well, but I feel like this change is pretty minimal other than the charms. Okay, next up we have Zen, and now it changed from other ally Axie gain 1 rage to all ally Axie gain 1 rage, and I think that could be quite significant because it basically gives you 1 extra rage stack. So in a way it actually can be something like a 132 damage per energy kind of card, assuming that all these rage stack is going to be used to get into Fury. So yeah, I think Zen can be pretty good, but as I said in my Beast video, it really depends a lot on how many other ways in which you can get rage, because if there are a lot of other ways in which you can get rage, then maybe getting rage is not the determining factor, and there are other things like dealing damage or like vulnerable or card draw. Those things might actually be limiting as opposed to rage, because you can get rage from runes and from charms as well, so you might not need a card text just to gain rage. And next we have Trump, and Trump originally, so this is original card text, it says randomly deal 3 hits. So originally it can be used to start off summons and things like that, but now it only deals 3 hits, meaning it has to hit the same target. So in a way, if you hit into the opponent with only like 25 health left, then there's quite a bit of overkill, so that's like a downside. So it definitely tunes down the power level of this card, I feel. Especially the inability to now snipe off summon, it could be quite significant. For Robin, I think I quite like this change. So basically now what it changed to is that you start with 0 AoE damage, but then you can stack immediately. So basically you play Robin and then you play some attack cards and doing some hits, then you're already stacking onto Robin, as opposed to waiting for the next turn to start stacking. I think this is definitely a better change, because let's say if you just do 2 attacks after summoning Robin, then it's already 24 damage kind of card because it's 8 AoE. Still not the best, of course, but let's say if you have a lot of multi-hit kind of card, and I assume those multi-hit counts as different attacks. But let's say if you do 6 attacks, then that is basically 24 AoE, so that's 72 damage for 1 energy, then that's pretty fair already. Of course, the maximum is that you can get to 25 attacks and 100 AoE, and that's 300 damage across the board for 1 energy. Definitely synergize very well with Feather Dagger, because each Feather Dagger is 1 hit. So let's say if you have quite a number of Feather Dagger in your hand, you just play Robin and then you Feather Dagger a few times, and that's already giving you maybe even 72 damage already. So yeah, I think it can be very strong. Okay, now Little Owl got a bit of nerf. So now it actually starts with 1 hit, so basically 20 damage. That's very little, and the bonus cap goes to 5, and that just means you still cap at 120, but basically that just means you start off a bit slower, quite a bit slower to be honest, and then each hit is basically you're losing 20 damage compared to before. So yeah, definitely tuning down the power level of Little Owl quite a bit, because before, let's say the first card you play is 40, and then the second card in terms of damage per energy is like 50 if you play 2, and then 60 if you play 3, but now, and you can see the number is a lot lower, basically lower by 10. Yeah, and that's definitely, I think, very significant. So let's just see if Triple Little Owl will still get played. I still hope that it will get played, just because personally I quite like Bird, but it definitely hurts quite a bit. Okay, finally we get to the numerical changes. So first up we have Glorious Mane. When I was doing the Beast video, I already feel that this is a bit underwhelming. So the runes here are the old ones, but basically originally you only gain 5 permanent damage when played, but now it gets to 10, which is I think better, but I feel like it's still not getting there. Let's say, for example, right, if your deck rotate once and you play every single card from this Axie, then you basically gain 60 damage per game if it's a fast game. Let's say if it's a game that kind of drags on and you rotate your deck twice, then you get maybe 120 extra damage, which is still not so great for an epic rune, I feel. Of course, there are ways in which you can get the card back again and then play it again, that kind of thing. So maybe you really have to play that kind of synergy in order to make this rune strong. And for Way of Beast, it now starts at 2 rage, which to be honest, I don't think it will get played too much. And yeah, I feel like getting 2 first is better than getting 1, but that's pretty much it. Pretty minimal change. Okay, Last Wish now get quite a bit of buff, and I quite like this one because now it basically is a pretty viable neutral rune. Now it says this actually gains 40, so I mean the rune here is the old text, but basically originally is 30, now I changed to 40. And yeah, 40 max HP is not too bad. It survives probably 1 hit at least. And then it says when this Axie dies, now it changed to 10% of its max HP is granted as shield to other ally Axies and dealt as damage to all enemy Axies. So now let's assume you have a base level 440 HP Axie because it grants you 40 max HP now. That means you're dealing 44 AoE because it's 10%, and basically that's 132 damage plus 88 shield as well because you're giving shield to 2 allies, assuming you still have 3 Axies, and that's 220 effects in total. So I quite like it, but of course you can buff the max HP to maybe 500, then you're doing 50 AoE, so 150 damage and 100 shield, so that's 250 effect in total. So I quite like this one, but do note that it's kind of like a one-off effect, I feel, so it doesn't really scale much with like the number of rounds, so probably goes better with kind of like an aggro kind of thing, because as the game drags on, you're gonna definitely lose value compared to like more value oriented team. So you still have to think about what kind of team this rune it fits into. Okay, then we have changes in Aquatic Energy Drink S. So originally it uses 3 PP, which is what's shown here, but then now it's changed to 4, which I guess is just an okay change. I think it's fair because gaining 2 bubble is quite a strong effect, so yeah, that's I must say I don't play Aqua enough to know how significant this change is. Basically now you can't fit 5 of these into an Axie now, and you have to play like 3 maximum in one Axie, so I think it's a good change because otherwise bubble could become too strong. And then we have Energy Drink S, and also changed from 3 to 4, so this is the original text shown here. So now it's 4 PP, and it says card base stats now only buffs 15%, which I think is fair because 20% with effectively no downside, assuming that you always want to play this card anyway, then I think it's too strong, especially for a 3 PP charm. So now 4 PP, 15%, I think is fair, especially for a neutral charm. Okay, then we have the Reptile Energy Drink M. So again, it's the original showing here. Originally, it says gains 2 Blood Spike, and now it changed to 5. So 2 is really very underwhelming. So now I changed to 5, meaning it'll do 5 AoE when this Axie dies, because each Blood Spike gives you 1 AoE. So 15 damage is not too bad, I would say, every time you play the card. But of course you do lose 20 HP, so in a way it's still like a negative 5 HP swing, so that's why I feel like it's still not good enough in that sense. So of course it synergizes with things like Tri-Spikes, which is basically the Spike and Blood Spike payoff kind of card. But still, 5 Blood Spike actually only gives you like 15 bonus damage when using Tri-Spike. I think it's still a bit underwhelming, so but that's just my feeling, of course. But now I think there's a bug in the game where I think Blood Spike just keep stacking up even when like other Axies get hit or something. So now of course Tri-Spike is gonna get hit very hard because of that bug. But still, maybe this could still be good in a Tri-Spike team, but otherwise I don't really see it being useful. Then we have the Epic Tier 2 class stat charms with the max XP change from -4 to -6, so giving it a bit more penalty. Still, I feel like 2 HP is not that much compared to how much effect it has, except for the Vitality Charms, of course, because the Vitality Charms increases your max HP, so it doesn't minus your max HP. Okay, and then there's some changes with the Bird's Charm of Focus 2 as well. So all these shown here are the original text. Now it changed from +7 to +6 for multi-hit and AoE attack, which I think is because when they tested, the bird is a bit too strong in terms of the multi-hit, and so I think they just tuned it down a bit from 7 to 6. And also, Grandma's Fan now only grants 1 feather for all ally Axie as opposed to 2. So originally the card text is 2 and it was really pretty strong, I felt. And now changing it to 1, I think again is fairer. It's still granting 3 feathers, and now in this case at least you need some more effort to get more feather. Okay, then we have some changes with the Thorny Caterpillar and Sandal. Both change to 110 base power. So I've shown the old ones here. And I think it's a pretty good buff. So it's basically kind of like an effort to try and boost the goo synergy and also maybe the debuff synergy. So I think pretty good now because the base level is 55 damage per energy, which is still not great. But of course both of the cards do have ways of buffing the damage. Yeah, I think it's a small change. May be able to incentivize people to play more goo or debuff kind of synergy, and just I think bugs in general. And then we have more bugs cards that are being buffed, and so now the leaf bugs are being buffed from 50, which is shown here, to 55. So small buff of 5 shield, and now it grants 55, of course, plus the 12 shield that you gain from the cocoon as well. And the 12 shield is per round, so I think, yeah, not bad. So giving it more shield in the beginning so that it I guess increases survivability. And adding 10 shield to Twin Tail I think is pretty good, because Twin Tail I felt like it's already a pretty strong effect, and now gaining basically a standard of 70 shield, yeah, I think it's actually one of the premium shield I feel in terms of the effect. Okay, for plants we have Beach, which now changed from 125 to 120, so basically changing it to a 60 damage per energy. Yeah, definitely not a big fan, just because I wish it's like a 1 energy cost card for this kind of tech card that removes secret, but it does say remove all secrets, so maybe that's strong enough as an effect. For Sirius, now it's changed to 20 bonus damage. I think it's probably fair just because now it applies Sleep, and Sleep is different from Disarm because originally back in S1 is Disarm, where you can still play shield card or anything, but now Sleep means you can't really play any card unless you want to waste a card to wake yourself up. So I think the sacrifice is fair in terms of dealing the 20 extra damage. It kind of buffs the aggro kind of plant, doesn't have to be plant, but like aggro in general, doing 90 damage. Okay, then we have a few changes with the healing as well. So Hot Butt changed from 25 to 30. Very insignificant, I feel. Still pretty low. And Cucumber Slice, actually I quite like this change. It's basically a buff from 40 heal cap to 50 heal cap, which means you can actually do 60 AoE heal now. And that's basically 180 heal per energy if you actually line everything up. So yeah, it was already, I feel like, could be a pretty strong card because it could deal 50 AoE before, and now it could do 60, which is even stronger. Okay, for Aqua we have Koi, which changed from 130 shown here to now 140, which I think is very strong. So basically now it's a 70 damage per energy card, and you can target closest or furthest enemy, meaning you can probably bypass shield in a way. So it's a bit of a mind game, of course, but yeah, usually people will still shield in the front, and then you can just hit their back for 140, which is pretty strong. And Goldfish changed from 60, shown here, to 65. Yeah, I guess giving it a bit of a buff, but I think the change is a bit minimal. Okay, and then they actually tuned down Anemone and also Lamb as well, because originally Anemone is 85 and they changed it to 80, meaning it now goes to from 80 to 50 to 20, which I think is actually quite a big nerf. And Lamb as well, it was originally 95 as shown here, but now it's gonna be 90. And so in a way it's also a very big nerf because, okay, sure, it's still very strong at 90, but then once the target has like 50 to 75% is only dealing 65 as opposed to 70 as before. So 65 is okay, and then 40 is just not great, and then 15 is very, very minimal. Maybe it's just because like the Aqua has just been too strong that they have to nerf it. And I do see quite a bit of Anemone and Lamb on ladder still despite the change. So yeah, maybe it's still strong enough to make it at the top. Okay, now with Beast, and then Beast we have Puppy, the ear one that changed from 15 as shown here to 20. So healing 20 is definitely a bit fairer, so it's effectively a 60 heal if every single Axie can be healed. Again, quite minimal, yeah, but still I guess better than before. Now Rise now changed from 55 to 60, which I think makes it definitely better. The original effect is already strong enough, I feel like stealing 1 energy if the attack is unblocked. Yeah, because I feel like this effect is actually kind of justifying the lower attack, similar to I'm thinking like Pigeon Pose kind of thing, but I guess they feel like stealing 1 energy is not that big of a deal and maybe buffing it to 60 would be better. But yeah, I think it's still quite a minimal change. And then we have this big one, and I think this one can be quite significant because now Imp changed from 60, which is shown here, to 65, and that's not it because the bonus damage originally was 20, so basically originally it deals 80 in Fury form. Now the bonus is 25, so basically you're dealing 90 in Fury form, of course times the 155 as well, so you're basically dealing 135 damage if you're in Fury form with Imp as opposed to 120, so that's quite significant I think. And even at the base level, you like 60 is not that much, but 65 you feel like it's just stronger than average already, and with retain as well. Yeah, so I think a lot of things going for Imp. But of course if you put the plus 11 damage charm on Imp, then it basically becomes 151.5 damage in Fury form. Yeah, I think this is definitely a very strong card for Fury kind of team. Then for Reptile we have Incisor. Now the base damage changed from 30 to 20, which is actually a buff because the bonus also changed from 30 to 45. So now if you hit the enemy, you are doing 65 damage as opposed to 60, but also if you're hitting an ally, you're only doing 20 to the ally as opposed to 30 from before. So definitely very strong. And putting 3 spike, so basically it's kind of like dealing 60 damage through the AoE from the spike and the blood spike. And it also buffs the tri-spike as well, so I think now Incisor definitely very strong in this kind of spike kind of team. And that is pretty much it, and there are also some card text changes which should be just the same effect as before, and they also put out a disclaimer as well saying of course it's all just still at the testing and balancing phase, so there'll definitely still be a lot of changes, and unfortunately there are quite a number of bugs in the game right now as well, so hopefully they'll get those fixed soon, because otherwise I can see that Season 2 might be delayed quite a bit. So yeah, let's just see how the game mechanics and cards will change before we get into Season 2. So thanks again for joining, so hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next video.